If you're watching this, then you already know that the game is rigged against you, and what you want is a way to game the system. Now, in the previous videos, I've talked about the target audience for Scribblebytes, and I mentioned the type 3, type 2, and type 1 personalities. Well, today I want to focus more on the type 2 personalities because this is where you're in the middle of your journey. This is when you've become awakened to the fact that you do live in a pyramid scheme called society, and that the social contracts that you think you signed, the rules that you thought that if you followed would actually get you anywhere, you've now come to realize that it's all BS. And so instead of trying to kind of be pushed in either one of the two directions that people are being pushed into in society, you want something more because it's not working. I mean, I was looking at one of the people that I study, and their name is JT. JT is a YouTuber, and here's his channel called Level Up Inc. And he is a typical type 2 personality. And you can see through his artwork and his design and also his content that he started as a type 3, where he talked about things about love and about feminism, and he looked at people like Sneeko and I mean Andrew Tate and you know all of this type 3 kind of personality stuff a couple of months ago, almost a year ago. But now, because of conditioning, he's moved on to being a typical type 2 personality, which is the initiation phase. This is when you have this battle or inner conflict between what you want and what society says you should be. And so now in his content, he's talking about things like the truth about porn and how it destroys men, and video game addictions and how those are terrible. And while he's still on his journey to becoming that fully realized maverick, it's very easy to see, as you can see in his video titles here, how easy it is to fall into the trap of social engineering. Now, when I talk about social engineering, I know that that's a term that's been applied to hacking. You know, how hackers will prey on your trust and con you into giving them your details so they can steal all your money and your identity. But I'm using social engineering in the way of sociology, in the way of interpersonal human relationships. And I'm saying that these social media applications do their own form of social engineering. I mean, how else are they getting you guys to upload content, put in all this time and effort into producing work for free? I mean, I have ads on some of my content, and this channel is not even monetized. So the big companies are making money for free. If that's not slavery, then I don't know what is. But this is not the topic of today's discussion. The topic of today's discussion is social engineering and how it's making people lose their minds. And it's particularly important for me to talk about this with you guys, my mavericks, my dear sweet mavericks, because I don't want you to jump out of the lifeboat and go and play into what society wants you to play into. Society is a pyramid scheme, and social engineers keep moving the goalposts so you can never score. And as you realize that you are losing yourself by making content just to get clicks, you are changing who you are. You are sacrificing your message and you're losing authenticity. Now, again, I understand that this is how you have been conditioned to behave. And that's the social engineering tactic I just want to briefly touch on today, which is the idea of psychological conditioning. Now, as you know, I talked about another YouTuber called Tom Hutch. And when I compared his profile to JT's profile, both of them are type 2 personalities. If you look at their thumbnail design, they're exactly the same. They both use the color red and blue as their primary colors in their digital online personas. Here's JT's videos. Red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. And here is Tom Hutch. Red arrows, red, blue, it's the same. So as a researcher and a producer, I would class these two personas as type 2 personalities. And I'm providing this information because I'm afraid that these type 2 personalities, with the way things are, it's becoming more enticing for them to give in to the social engineering and to take extremist positions just so that they can get views, just so they can get engagement. Now, one of the latest videos that JT uploaded was about video game addiction. And of course, he took an extreme position by calling people who are addicted to video games fat slobs. Now, of course, JT is not a horrible person. He's just trying to make it in this social media world. And he has been conditioned to believe that if I make extremist comments and take an extremist position, then I'll be able to get engagement. And YouTube has told us that it doesn't matter if people like or dislike your video, even if they leave bad comments, as long as you have the magical word, which is engagement. So now you see people taking these harsh positions, even if they don't believe them, or even if they don't speak like that in real life. They do it because they know they're going to get comments, which ups their engagement, which gives them access to a larger audience. So in the comment section for his latest video, JT is talking about how people who play video games are fat slobs and they need to go to the gym, they need to get their lives in order, read books, and educate themselves. All wonderful things. But of course, by using the extremist language, everyone in the comments was calling him out for it. And so he wrote a pinned comment. This is the video. And he said, a lot of pressed people from this video trying to defend something they know deep down is wrong. What has this world come to? Wake up. You are defending your insecurity rather than dealing with it. And as I said a few videos before, this is what a type 2 personality would say. And it's interesting he mentions that word insecurity and wake up. Because that's exactly what I wrote in my research a couple of years ago about these personalities. Again, if you want to read that research, go into the description box and you'll see it with all the receipts. Because a type 3 personality is all about security, but a type 2 is saying let go of that security or your false ideas about what security is and man up, get it together. That's the kind of rhetoric that they use. And here it is, for plain as day for all to see. I love it when research comes together. So now, is he wrong? No. Is he behaving out of conditioned responses? Absolutely. Again, if you go to his profile and look at what he's trying to do in his about section, he talks about he wants to empower you to reach new heights and unlock your true potential. So when you read something like that, you know his intention is in the right place, but then he's calling people fat slobs. Now, he doesn't mean that, but he knows that by using that language, he has more chance of reaching a bigger audience. And this is why I wanted to talk about what I wanted to talk about today, which is conditioning. And I'm going to be reading a few things from, pretty much my Bible when it comes to academics and understanding the human mind, which is man in context. And there's a chapter on it on conditioning. Now, there are two different types of conditioning, and you have classical conditioning and operant conditioning. And I want to focus more on operant conditioning because that's the greatest threat to you, my dear Maverick. Because it's one thing to wake up from being asleep. I get it. It's one thing to realize that all the stuff that's been fed to you is a lie designed to get you to buy stuff, designed to make you weak. And while that might be great for 9 out of 10 people, I understand through my countless hours of research into you and your thinking that you don't want to do that. Some people do, and that's okay. They can watch and enjoy those silly videos of nothing that adds nothing to their lives except entertainment and laughing. That's fine. But you want something to improve yourselves, to empower yourselves. And just like I spoke about in the video about power, when you are improving yourself, it takes self-discipline. And that's how you empower yourself. Now, if somebody wants to spend their time playing video games, that's their prerogative. But I understand your frustration that when you log on to the websites or on any social media or mainstream media platform, the people you see continuously getting rewarded are being rewarded for weakness. And that doesn't sit well with you. And that's why you're here, because at Scribble Bites, we only make content for mavericks. So we won't do anything that doesn't empower you. So you can rest assured that any content we make is made to stimulate you, to give you catharsis based on your life experience. For example, if you go to the playlist called Simple, any one of the 9 out of 10 people who do not think like you, they will take that series seriously. They will think it's a literal thing that I'm saying. But you, Mavericks, you'll laugh because it is a comedy, it's satire, it's irony, it's a parody of the other 9 out of 10 people and how they think. A perfect example is I put some of this stuff on Instagram and some of it on Twitter. Twitter is where I go completely ham because Twitter is a toilet gutter. And so I do the completely crass, vulgar stuff on Twitter. And then on Instagram, it's the more high-minded, artistic representation of these ideas. And then here on YouTube, I just tell you about it. And so on Instagram, people were confused about a video I made called the sex tape leak of Charlie Manor. It's in the video section of the YouTube. So I'm playing a character called Charlie Manor, who is an actor, an Academy Award winning actor. And if you go watch that video, it's him reacting to a news report, a live news report, about his sex tape being leaked to the public. Now, some people thought that was real when I put it on Instagram, and they were reaching out to me and saying, I'm so sorry this happened. Bless you, child. And then on YouTube, the people in the comments understood that it was just a bit. It was a sketch. It wasn't real. In that video, I'm making a comment that the media rewards bad behavior. It conditions you into thinking that, oh, if I have a sex tape leak, something showing me in a debased, undignified light, I will get publicity. And so people are encouraged to use these things and manufacture these things where they are victims so that they can get publicity. Now, I'm not saying everybody does it, but we know countless people whose music sales have gone up when they had a sex tape scandal. And so this is how conditioning works. Conditioning is not just about what you learn in a classroom. Aristotle talked about conditioning as an association between ideas. So if you think of an apple, the next thought you might have is Adam and Eve. The next thought you might have is forbidden fruit. And the next thought might be knowledge. So an apple can be a symbol for knowledge. Then you have that trope of giving a teacher an apple. Why do you give a teacher an apple? Because it has to do with knowledge. Then you have sayings like an apple a day keeps the doctor away. All of these things weren't taught to you, but they are forms of an association of ideas that you make, which is a form of learning. So nobody's out there saying, if you want to make money, leak a sex tape and you'll get a show on E. No, nobody's saying that. But through your life experience, you've learned that, wait a minute, why is it that this actor and this actor have relationship troubles just as their film is about to be released? Why is it that this music artist has a sex tape leak right as his music single is about to be released? And why is it that the advertising around that music release is linked to what's going on in their personal lives? That's all part of conditioning. And what's happening on YouTube is that regular people like you and me are starting to do the same thing so that they can get recognition. And you being a maverick, this is extremely dangerous for you because it goes against your main goal, which is to be authentic. Now, I know that some of you think, I'm just going to take this extremist position just for this little while. Then I'll get my subscribers and I'll get my sponsorships. Then I'll be a nice person, just like I've always been, and I'll help people. But what I'm saying is, you will drive yourself insane if you do that, because you are going against who you are and you are giving an inauthentic product. But this is not to judge you. Life is a journey, and so is the process of becoming a maverick. And you're just at that stage right now where you know what's going on is a lie, but you don't know what to do about it because you haven't been presented with a third option. And that's why I often see the type 2 personalities talking about their gymming and their weight loss and using their bodies to get views. So they'll have their shirtless pictures on because they know people are going to come and look. But at the same time, they resent the fact that they have to do that. And so they end up resenting the audience. It's kind of like the sweatshirt theory, right? You all heard about the sweatshirt theory. It's a term in psychology where some people have come to me on the front of the sweatshirt and then at the back it says, leave me alone, or vice versa. Come to me at the back and leave me alone at the front. And so it's like, I'm gonna tease you with my body so you come watch my content, but then when you come watch the content, I'm gonna tell you, stop watching porn and stop focusing on video games. And that's kind of the conflict that I'm talking about. And I'm telling you, it's because you've been conditioned to behave that way. And so I just want to talk about classical conditioning briefly, and then the main thing that's happening, which is operant conditioning. And just like the social engineers or the hackers who try and get your personal information by building trust and conning you, the same thing is happening with all these social media platforms. They are giving you certain tricks, psychological tricks, in the hopes that you respond in a predictable way. And before I go into conditioning, I just want to talk about China. China doesn't allow certain content on their TikTok. Why? Well, they want to build a certain kind of society. And the things that are allowed in our TikTok, for example, and social media platforms are proof that we are being conditioned in a certain way. And I've heard a lot of YouTube gurus make the argument that, oh no, the algorithm only focuses on what's good. So if you are making content that's good, and you will be taken up by the algorithm. And if you're not in the algorithm, it's because you're making content that's bad. That is typical gaslighting. They are lying to you. The algorithm is programmed by a human. And my argument is that people or audiences have been conditioned to believe that in order to make good content, they have to carry themselves without dignity and respect and to debase themselves. And we can see this example by looking at China, where these things are not allowed, and we're seeing how their society is progressing versus how our society is progressing. So the argument that it's your fault for not making good content, pure and utter lies. It's all part of the social engineering to make you think you're doing something wrong. And what I want to present with this is a way for you to realize that even if you don't get the views you want at the moment, even if you don't get the sponsorship and the money, rather stay authentic to yourself. We're all on a lifeboat. And on this lifeboat, we are helping each other by keeping our values and our creative and artistic sensibilities aligned with what we authentically believe in. And so whenever we sacrifice that, you're jumping off the lifeboat and you'll be eaten by the sharks. So let's talk about conditioning. Now, when we talk about conditioning, we're basically talking about learning, because these are ways in which people learn through conditioning. We have something called classical conditioning, which is something that is intrinsic in you, right? So when you put food in your mouth naturally salivates. You didn't have to sit in a classroom to be taught that. It happens. Now, how is this used by marketing or by corporations or social engineers? Well, there are certain fast food restaurants which pump certain smells through into the neighborhood, and you walk past, you smell this delicious cheesy pizza, and then you start salivating and you say, hey, I want to go have a pizza. Or you smell the barbecue and you want to go have some. That is an unconditioned stimulus and an unconditioned response. It's natural inside of you. Now, conditioning and learning is all about the relationship between a stimulus and a response. And with classical conditioning, the stimulus and the response are normally unconditioned. Now, in the early 20th century, there was a man called Ivan Pavlov, and he is or was a Russian physiologist, and he studied the relationship between a stimulus and a response. And I'm sure all of you know and have heard about his study using dogs, right? The Pavlovian dog experiment. And what he did was he introduced a conditioned response, which was a bell. So he fed a dog food, the dog salivated, stimulus, food, salivation, response, normal. So the dog didn't need to learn that. But then he introduced various different stimulus, one of them, or stimuli, one of them was a bell, and he also introduced light and pressure on the head of the dog. But let's look at the bell that I'm sure you've heard of. So what he did was he rang a bell and the dog didn't do anything. Then he rang a bell and then gave the dog food. So over time, the dog started to learn that whenever I hear a bell, I can expect food to come to me. So the dog would start salivating even when the food wasn't there, just by the sound of the bell. Now, this is where we start getting into these waters of conditioning that you guys experience online. Now, I was listening to a video about serial killers and people who do mass shootings, and one of the school shooters said that the reason he did it was because he knew he was going to get on TV if he did that. He did it for attention. Now, that's an example of conditioning, because we know that if you do bad things, you'll be in the media, everyone will talk about you, and they'll give you attention. So we've been conditioned in that way. Now, when you have someone who's mentally disturbed, they would take it to that level where if they're being abused at home, they have nothing and no one to give them attention. It's no wonder they would go to that length where they say, okay, if this is how I'm going to be heard, I'm going to do what it takes, what I've learned it takes to get on TV. And then they end up doing horrible things. Then you have experts go on the TV and say, we had no idea why this happened. Maybe it's because of Gen Z this, or maybe it's because of Gen Z that. No, it's because you keep positively reinforcing bad behavior. Rule number 1, do not reward bad behavior. So, going into operant conditioning, I think that's a perfect place to go into. We need to look at a man called Thorndike's problem box. Now, Thorndike was also a researcher who was working around the same time that Pavlov was doing his experiments on classical conditioning. But what Thorndike did, and some of the researchers after him, was look at how you can shape behavior through conditioning without having to introduce a response. In other words, how can you make someone do what you want them to do without being there to ring a bell? How do you do it so that they learn on their own? Because if they learn on their own, then they'll just think it's normal and natural and real. So what Thorndike did was he put a cat in a box. Here's the cat in the box. And what he did was he put a plate of food outside of the box. Now, in order for the cat to get the food, the cat had to figure out on its own that it needs to somehow pull this string or pulley thing, and then the box would open and the cat would be able to get the food. So here we don't have a bell like we do in classical conditioning. Now we have operant conditioning where you, the operator, the person, you figure out on your own what to do. But you are like the cat in the box. All you know is here's YouTube, here's social media, here's Twitter, here's Instagram. I'm in Instagram. I need to get millions of views. So I'm going to do whatever it takes until I get those views. You don't think about the fact that you're in a box. Someone put you in the box. Someone controls how the box opens. You think it's natural, or you need to do this to your thumbnail. You need to learn this trick. You need to use tags and keywords. No. You're in a box. You're the cat. And it's already been predetermined how to open the box. And so it's a good way of keeping society going around and around and around in circles, while the people in control of the box get away with murder, literally, while you get cancelled for calling people fat and slobs. Do you see how this works now and why it's dangerous? So when the cat was in the box, the cat goes through trial and error until it figures out how to open the box and get to the food. Now, the first time the cat does it, it doesn't remember, oh, that's what I did. But a funny thing happens. As the cat keeps doing this over and over again, it starts eliminating all other possibilities of how to get the food until it figures out on its own, oh, I get the food when I do this. Because when I do this, it pulls the string and it opens the box. So now there's an association between doing this action and getting the food. And that's where the danger comes for you, my dear Mavericks, because now you end up doing behaviors which you normally wouldn't do, but they give you the result that you want. And that's how you change someone. That's how you sign your soul away to the devil and you become something you're not. And secretly, you end up resenting your audience for it. Now, there was another gentleman who invented something called the Skinner box. And in the Skinner box, it does kind of the same thing. He was an American called Burris F. Skinner, and he also continued on this work by Thorndike. And what Skinner did was something similar, except he did it with a pigeon. He put a pigeon in a box, and the only way for the pigeon to get food was that the pigeon would have to pick a hole in the box, and only when the light from outside shone into the box, then the pigeon, a drop of food would go in and drop of water. And then the pigeon knew that, okay, I have to pick a hole through this box, I have to damage this box, then only when the light shines through in the box, then I get some food and water. And so again, the process of doing something gave the association to the pigeon that it will be rewarded with life-sustaining materials like food. And the same thing is what we're seeing happening. And it's very dangerous to you guys, because for the 9 out of 10 people who don't mind doing that and who find it as being empowering, watching porn and selling nude pictures of themselves, to them that's empowering, it's sex positivity, and that's great. I love that for them. But what about you? I'm talking to you. You don't like that, and it's okay. You're allowed to not like that. And so I'm saying these are the mechanisms you are up against that are pulling you in that direction. And you don't need to be coerced and shouldn't be forced to do those things in order to find your audience and to have your message come across, because you also deserve to be heard. And so the danger I'm seeing happening is, because there really isn't a third option for most people until Scribble Bytes appeared on the scene, you have this thing where you start going into these directions of changing your behavior so that you can get somewhere. And that's extremely dangerous. And so I just want to read a bit from this book about behavioral shaping and how this affects behavior. So behavioral shaping is an operant conditioning technique which makes the learning of a desired or required response possible through the reinforcement of successive approximations of the desired or required response. This can be explained as follows. So then they go into how that Skinner box operates with the pigeon. And now that's very important. Let's look at that line again where it says, it makes the learning of a desired or required response possible through reinforcement. Now, when you see people getting views, getting interviewed on TV for some stupid thing they did, getting money, changing their lifestyles, that is reinforcing the path they took. And so operant conditioning lies in that association that we all make when we watch content. I mean, there's this channel called Nikki Cameron's. I'm not subscribed to that channel, yet YouTube keeps sending me videos by this person, how I do not know, to my notifications, not subscribed. And all this person does is go, please, and sit and look at the camera like this. That's it, for a minute. That is conditioning, guys. It is not the algorithm. I don't watch that nonsense, yet the platform we're on is feeding me rubbish. And it's an unspoken form of communication, because what they're saying is, if you do what this person is doing, we will send you to random people too. Now, you will never see that in China. In China's social media, you will see people thinking, creating, engineering things, solving problems for their community. So then you start to think, well, why doesn't our society do that? Well, maybe it's been planned or engineered that in the future we will be the future slave race and we won't have any options but to work for the people who did develop themselves. And for a maverick, that is a frightening prospect. And so I understand when people like JT are screaming into the camera, read, read a book, go to the gym. It's because they don't want to be taken down that road. But what I'm saying is, by doing that, by taking an extremist position, you are going down that road because you are allowing the conditioning to take place on you. There is a way you can get your message across, be authentic, without losing the essence of who you are to the conditioning masters, to the social engineers who are trying to rile you up so that we have this disparate society. And I'm not going to speculate much on why it's like this, except to say it's to sell products. It's much easier to cater to the lowest common denominator of human psychology than it is to seek the higher aspects of human psychology. I was watching a show where a TV show where a doctor got these university students to, one side were Republicans, the other side were liberals. And he said, guys, stand up and organize yourself in didactic pairs and look at each other. Don't say anything, just look at each other. One Republican, one liberal, just stare at each other. And they're standing there and staring at each other just to be in each other's presence without going insane. And then afterwards, they all sat down and he says, so what did you see? And it broke my heart. And, it was very telling. Because some of what people were saying was, I could see her pause and I saw my pause. And it was like, it was all based on physical looks. And then I saw this other YouTube short where they had this box where they told people to write down their secrets or something they were ashamed of or something they didn't tell anyone. And anonymously, they would write it down and then read it later. And it was things like, oh, I feel insecure about my body. I feel insecure about my acne. My hair's not right. I wish I was taller. And I understand why you guys are upset because we live in a society now where it's all about looks, where you have these smart, intelligent people not caring about why two-thirds of the people in my country have no access to clean drinking water, why we have a cholera outbreak in my country where 30 people by now have died, when but with and no one cares about that. Everyone's talking about looks, and these are doctors and lawyers and accountants. And it's because of how they've been conditioned. And so when you come here as a maverick and you say, guys, let's do this, let's do this, let's improve ourselves, let's empower ourselves, nobody cares. And so it would be really cool if people like JT and Tom Hutch, for example, they are both type 2 personalities, if they got together and started working on something. See, the main conditioning of a pyramid scheme is that one person has to be on top and everybody else contributes to that person going down. But the reason why I like using the upside down triangle is because why don't we have the top thinkers at the top funneling down their knowledge and information and resources to specific causes at the bottom? We're not all going to save the world's problems. It's just not our job and it's not going to happen. And that's not the purpose of this. I mean, I know my job is entertainment and narrative, storytelling. That's it. Yes, I talk about political ideas and social ideas and psychological ideas, But really, my main point or purpose is entertainment. I'm not trying to get you to vote or change the world. In fact, if you go to the description box, you'll see something I developed called RAC, which is Real Artists Care. And I developed that for you, Mavericks, because I understand that you are all about empowerment and you don't let other people's issues bring you down. So the reason I developed it and called it RAC is because it's based off the word racist. And the tagline is erase ists. Take out the ists. Because Mavericks don't let sexists and racists and polygamists and bigamists and all the ists, they don't let those people stop or dim their flow, their light, their goals. And you'll see it a lot in how they speak and their rhetoric. It's like, you don't have to choose to do nothing. You don't have to choose the easy way out. You can choose to be better so that you can live the life you want to live. So Mavericks, they don't blame the government, they don't blame blah, 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 they don't blame people. And if you go and sign that petition, it's your way of saying, yes, I believe in personal responsibility, that regardless of historical context, social, economic, whatever, I know I have a choice, and my choice is how I spend my time. And I can either spend my time playing video games or watching porn or whatever, feeding into the system that is not helping me, or I can spend my time reading and learning and finding ways to not game the system, because you're never going to game the system, but to create a new game and play a new game, your game, the game that works for you. And that's where Scribble Bites comes in the way of entertainment. Because when you watch our shows, our movies, our songs, our content, our blogs, vlogs, everything, it's keeping you in that vibrational frequency. It's keeping you on that path where, yes, we acknowledge all the things going on outside of us, but we choose to laugh about this and that. We choose to empower ourselves with information. We choose ourselves. Because ultimately, that's the only thing you ever have control over in this world. Yourself.